Blessings to you, blessings today. Blessings to you, blessings today. What a beautiful day that we have here today, and I am so glad to be able to come on and share a little bit with you today. Again, my name is Stephen Evans, and I'm so proud to be associated with Minds Matter. And as we move into our broadcast today, of course, you've heard about my different messages throughout these last week. The several last messages that I've shared was the Seekers of Men, talking about leadership and being role models. And of course, what is your consistency? What does people say about it? What is your predictability? As we come into our messages today, before I get started here, and this one is called Bicycle. Yes, today's podcast is called The Bicycle. But the Lord just put me on there to share this today, and it goes back to my mindset, my seekers of men, my consistency, my predictability. This was, first of all, as always, going back to my predictability, I want to make sure that I send shout outs to my partner in this, Mr. T. McBride, and I also want to share a shout out to Mr. Alex, our technical support, and it was not through our combined visions we would not be sharing this information with you today. As I move into this discussion today about the bicycle, it's a true story, just like the rest of the information I've shared to you. I am going to put out one of those parental notifications that this may not be something that everybody should listen to, the younger populations. But I say this in love, but this is a true story. My predictability. Now, this takes place. I'm not going to give specific times and locations, etc., to protect names, etc., etc., etc. During this time, our campus had made some huge strides as to the culture. And one of my predictabilities, one of my consistencies is that when the Lord has placed me in authority over the building, and I say this very lovingly, I don't want no one messing with us. Amen? When the Lord has placed me in authority over those buildings, it's like my family, and I don't want anyone messing with us. On this particular day, the students had learned a lot about me, my consistency, my protection, my love, my expectations, my safety. I was very predictable in those areas. I do not advise anyone to do what I did in regards to the bicycle, but this is my story. As I always start my podcast, I would like to say that if you're looking for someone who has shortcomings, you can find me in that category. If you're looking for someone who's not perfect in leadership, you can point your finger at me. But I can say that over the time I have worked as best I could to get better and better and better. But there were some things in my leadership and my family that I am very predictable about. I'm very consistent about. I'm very predictable about. I'm very consistent about. I'm very predictable. I'm very consistent. Our school culture in the very middle of this intercity area, where there was a huge number of community concerns, particularly with gangs and adolescents. But we had fixed that at our academy there, and reducing student concerns by 70% in less than a year, because of the joint efforts of the entire staff and the consistency. And as I've shared inside of some of my podcasts, that the staff members there, I just can't say enough about them. When we all focused ourselves and we came together as one for the mission, we all became consistent. We became very predictable. Well, on this day, it was just another good day. I'm standing out front as I usually do, very predictable, very predictable. And some students walked up, and of course, we were having conversation. And another little guy walks up. I love that little boy. I loved all of them, but I love that little boy. He's just a good kid, man. He's just a good kid. You know, he's not very large in stature. He's one of those guys who's more likely, who's not going to stand up for himself, for lack of better words, and I say this in love. He's one of those little guys, and many people who on the school campus know these students. He does all the right things, comes to school every day, dressed in school uniform, very positive. But again, his demeanor is such that if you wanted to find a small man to pick on, he would be the one. And consistently, if anyone would know about me, I don't like nobody messing with those type students. Don't mess with them. If you want to ruffle my feathers and see a more assertive side of me, don't mess with those little people. So on this day, I see him walking to school, which was out of his norm. And for building leaders, you should be able to see your students coming into your buildings each day, because they're just like we are. They're very consistent. We know that some of those little guys, that when we look at them in the morning, if you see them as a good leader, and remember, all of us are good leaders. All of us are leaders. As a good classroom teacher in my years in the classroom, I could tell the way that the student walked into building if it was a good day or if it was not a bad day. I could tell just by looking at them. You know, I could tell just by looking at them, and I would immediately call them to me and say, "Is everything okay today?" No matter what it was, I would always tell them, "We can get that fixed. Don't worry about it. We can get that fixed. I just want to see you smile today and have a good day." And most oftentimes they did. "We'll get that fixed. That's not a problem. We can get that fixed." And I think that comes with loving your kids and respecting who they are and seeing them, not looking at them, but seeing them. Seeing them. As a good leader, you should also be able to see your employees, just not look at them, but you should also see them. Is this a good day, or is this kind of a struggling day? Is there something going on? And by us moving through, looking at our situation, we should be able to see them. Well, on this day, this little guy who usually rides his bicycle, and he always parked it in the same spot. He was consistent, like most of us all. And I would believe to say too, while I'm talking about consistency, which was in my last podcast, that all of us like a level of predictability. Well, on this day, he's with some people walking to school, and I said to him, you know, for lack of a better term, "John Doe, where's your bicycle today, man? Why you didn't ride your bike today?" And the other kids immediately started laughing, and they said, "They took his bike." And he turned to me, and I could tell the look on his face, and he says, "They didn't take my bike, I gave it to him." And the other little girl says, "Nobody just gave their bike away. You were scared, they just took it." Now this little guy's in high school, 9th grade. They took your bike. And you could tell he was shamed by the words that were said. And I said, "Have a great day," which he always usually would say, "Have a great day, Dr. Evans," and give me a hug. But on this day, he said, "Nothing. Have a great day." Those words from his friends, they hurt him because there was a level of truth. Someone took his bike. So I called the girls to the side and I said, "Ladies, I know that's your friend and everything, but I could tell the days that your words hurt him a little bit." "Well, Dr. Evans, he got to stand up for himself." No. Listen to this. There are some people who can stand And there's other people who have a difficult time standing. Do you understand that? What do you mean, Dr. Evans? There's some people who will stand and fight for misjustice. And there's some who are, even though they desire to, they just haven't developed that yet. And you admit he's a good guy, isn't he? And they all said, yeah, he's a really nice guy. And you would also admit whoever took his bicycle, they wronged him, right or wrong. And the one little girl, she began to ramp. And I can't stand those guys. They in 11th and 12th grade, picking on a little guy from 9th grade. So I immediately turned to them and I said, so you know who they are? And the little girl said, yeah, we know who they are. They're little bullies in the neighborhood. Nobody likes them. They're bullies in the neighborhood. I said, I'm going to come and see you a little bit later today. And I have to admit, during this time when they told me that, because of my personality, I hope that I've improved in it a little bit, that immediately drew my attention. And I would have to say that there was probably, in honesty, a level of anger that someone would do something like that to that little boy. So as the day started, I went and got my good friend. And if he's listening to this, he was one of our leadership on campus. And I told him of the story, and I asked him to go get those students. Now, this is about maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock in the day, not too long before school out. We bring them down, and they tell the story of how the young man's bicycle got taken. And they told me what high school the kid attended. And I have to say that my energy level was extremely high. I'm going to use that word, that my energy level was extremely high. And my energy level was so high, as they told the story, the kids looked at me and they said, Dr. Evans, are you angry right now? I said, no, I'm just listening. So my trusted assistant, he got the name, and I turned to him after the students left, and I asked him, where is that high school at? And he said, it's about a mile down the road over there. It's a pretty big school. It's a pretty big school. They got out of school about 30 minutes after we did. So, of course, I'm seeing the little boy leave after school, and I could tell he was really sad. And I said, Doctor, I don't want you to worry about this. I'm going to take care of that for you. He said, Mr. Evans, it's not a big deal. They can just have the bicycle. I really didn't like that bicycle anyway. I said, okay, all right. So our campus cleared. I knew that school was getting out within the next few minutes. And my trusted assistant, it was all over my face. Some of the staff members even said, Dr. Evans, you okay, man? I said, yeah, I'm doing fine. Everything is well. But I couldn't let it go. I just could not let it go. I'm sorry, but I could not let it go. So as I walked back in, I said, my trusted assistant, where's that school again? He said, it's right over there. I said, come with me. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm on my way to the high school, and I don't know how to get there. I need you to direct me to how to get there. He said, you going where? I said, I'm going to the high school over there. And he looked at me kind of wide-eyed like, what are you going to do? And he said, you serious? I said, yes. And I was walking, I guess, pretty quickly. And I got to my car, and I thank God for this. I thank God for it. And please know I don't flatter in any kind of way of this. But, of course, it was a beautiful big four-door white Jaguar, XJL, the long body type, low profile with those California rims. It's one of those cars. And, again, I truly thank God for that. I can't take any honor in that, but I do thank God for providing me with always nice vehicles and nice clothing, etc. But I have to give you so you can see what this looks like. So we go to my car, and it wasn't until after I found out later that there were some staff members who said, Evans is going to that school up there, because everybody had heard about it. Because of my nature and how I looked. I got in the car, and I'm not going to call his name, my trusted colleague, and he'll tell you the truth. We drive up to the high school, and I was probably driving a little bit aggressive because I was pretty wired up. And I pull in front of the high school, and it's right at dismissal times, and there are hundreds of kids coming out. Our campus had about 600 kids, and this campus probably had 1,000 or more. And you could see the deans, the security people all out front, and the kids are pulling out. And I pull right up front, and I pull in right directly in front of the school, and I get out. And I'm so wired up from this. The car was probably still moving when I opened the door, and I get out, and of course I am in a tailored suit, gold on, necktie, ultimate professional school ID on, and I'm walking to the school, and I'm walking at a very high pace. And one of the security people out there said, "Excuse me, sir, I guess he could see by my language of my body, there must be a problem." And he came to me and he asked me, "Sir, blase, blase, blase." And I told him who I was. He saw my school ID. He said, "How can I help you today?" And I gave him the student name to Mr. Jackson. I'm sorry, I'm gonna leave the name in there. Mr. Jackson might as well out there, because he'll tell you the story is true. So he comes up to me and he says, "Why are you here?" And I tell him I'm here. I said, "Mr. Jackson, what's that student's name?" Mr. Jackson gave him the student's name. He said, "Oh yes, I know about that student. I know about that student. We've had a lot of concerns out of here." He says, "But I cannot allow you to address this student, and I cannot allow you to point it. I cannot point him out. And I know you're a school official. I've heard good things about this school. I've heard about everything that you're doing over there, but I can't allow you to do this today." And I told him, "You listen to me, sir. I'm going to do what you asked me to do." And I paraphrase, "I'm going to do what you asked me to do in Christ Jesus. I want to be obedient to you. And I do understand what you're saying, and I respect that. But I want you to do me a favor." He said, yeah, what is it?" I said, "Tomorrow or today, when you see that student, he stole one of our kids' bicycle, a good kid. And that is not going to stand with me. That is not going to stand. So I want you to do me a favor. I need you to do this for me so that I don't get myself in no trouble. Because I don't want no problems here on the east side. I don't want no problems. When you see him, I want you to please tell him that I came by here today looking for him. I want you to tell him that. And if you would please, I want you to give his parents a call and tell him that I came by looking for them today. And I want you to also share with the parents what that young man did. And I want you to also share with them that I want that bicycle back on my campus tomorrow. And if it's not here, I am coming back here tomorrow. I'm coming back here every single day to that which is stolen has been returned." The guy looked at me and he began to smile. And I believe he said, "Wow." He said, "I'm going to tell him that. I'm going to tell him." He said, "I'm going to tell him. I'm going to tell him." He says, "But let me take care of him from this point on." "Okay, brother, I'm going to trust that you're going to take care of that. But if that bicycle, if that little boy's not back on that bicycle when he comes to my campus in the morning, you can best believe tomorrow dismissal, I'm going to be right up here again." And the gentleman said, "I'll tell him that." So I went back to the school, driving back. Mr. Jackson started laughing. He says, "Dr. Evans, you are one wild dude, man. You are one wild dude." "You are one wild dude." I said, "Jackson, they're not going to do that to our kids. I take it personal like it's my kid. And if you do that to my kid, I'm coming to see you." Amen? That is my nature. That is my nature. That is who I am. And from the changes in the school, this is just one story that I'm sharing with you that has been consistent. Well, to make a long story short, I went home and it bothered me all night. And definitely when I woke up the next morning, it was the first thing on my mind. And I drove back to school, and of course I did my morning routes as always. And when I came up to the school that morning, I saw that young man coming, and he was on his bicycle. He had the biggest smile on his face. He had the biggest smile on his face. And he came into the school, and when he got off the bicycle, he came to me and he gave me a big hug, as he always did. He was back to himself again. Good morning, Dr. Evans. And he said, "You'll never believe what happened." I said, "What happened?" He says, "For whatever reason, those boys brought my bicycles back." That's what I'm glad that they did. You have a great day today. And look here, brother, I got a question for you. "Yes, sir. What's the best place to be, man?" And he says, "Best place to be," and he called the name of the school. There's no better place to be today than that. Well, as the day went on, I don't know how, but the word had gotten around the school to the kids. And there was a couple of students who came after school, and I looked at them in their eyes, and it was almost as if they knew what I had did. Several of them who did not say nothing, they knew that I went to that school. I don't know how they knew that, but they knew that I had went up there. There were some staff members who knew that I had went up there. There was a couple staff members who told me that they knew, they found out what I had did. And there was others who never said anything, but they looked at me, and I knew that they knew. After school, I saw that little boy was getting on his bike. So, "Brother, have a great day today. I know you'll be in school tomorrow. You got perfect attendance." And he said, "Yes, I'll be here tomorrow. I got perfect attendance." And then he comes back to me and he says, "Thank you, Mr. Evans." And I said, "Thank you for what?" And he never said anything. He just rode away. What is your predictability? What is your consistency? What is your leadership? What is your predictability? What does people say about you? What does people say about you? What is your predictability? I thank you for listening today. As always, subscribe. I have so much more to tell you about my leadership, and I thank you so much for listening. Again, thank you to Mr. McBride. Thank you for Mr. Alex for making this possible. For those who are listening again, thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for allowing me to pour a little bit into your life. Have a great day, and above all else, you are blessed. You are a leader. Have a great day.